and welcome to the HKUST Li and Fung Supply Chain Institute Inaugural Summit. I'm Helen Chen from HKUST Business School, your MC today. Today, we're here to celebrate this special occasion on the establishment of the Institute aimed at advancing research and practices in global supply chain management. May we now invite HKUST President, Professor Nancy Ip, to give us the welcoming remarks. Professor Ip, please.
The Honorable Michael Wong, Dr. Victor Fung, Dr. William Fung, and Dr. Vincent Lo, distinguished guests, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. It really gives me great pleasure to welcome you all to celebrate the establishment of the HKUST Li and Fung Supply Chain Institute. This really is a momentous occasion for us, and we're really honored to have the Acting Financial Secretary, the Honorable Michael Wong, to be with us here today to witness this significant milestone. Supply chain management to us is really an essential element of operations management and has significant impacts on the global economy, environment, and society. So as such, it is included in the Hong Kong SAR government's budget to develop a multinational supply chain management center. To contribute to this very important initiative, HKUST is so excited to partner with Li and Fung Group to establish the HKUST Li and Fung Supply Chain Institute. We believe that this institute will harness the strengths of both parties to explore new research questions and develop cutting-edge technologies, solutions to address the evolving needs of the society and businesses. This institute also serves as a very important platform for knowledge sharing, collaborations, and talent development in the supply chain development. And we believe that by working together, we'll be able to make positive impacts, both locally and internationally, contributing to the growth and prosperity of the global economy. So HKUST is very honored to collaborate with Li and Fung in this exciting initiative with the strong support from Dr. Victor Fung and Dr. William Fung. They are both distinguished leaders in business, and their visionary leadership and also their unwavering commitment to excellence have steered Li and Fung to become a global leader in innovation development and value creation in supply chain management. So for this joint effort, we are really excited to work together to create synergy, to advance the knowledge in supply chain management, while leveraging and capitalizing on Hong Kong's very unique position as a leading hub of resilient multinational supply chains. So again, our heartfelt appreciation to Drs. Victor and William Fung for their unwavering support. And HKUST really look forward to partnering with you, to collaborating with you to achieve our shared goals. And we believe that in due time, the Institute will become a global leader in supply chain management with both local and international commitments. And we truly believe in that. So thank you again for your trust in us and for your support. I think this is, again, a very significant milestone for HKUST to have this opportunity to partner with you. And we really look forward to working together to make this institute a globally renowned institute in time. Thank you again. Thank you.
Thank you very much, President Yip. Please be seated. It is my pleasure to welcome our esteemed guest, the Honorable Michael Wong, Acting Financial Secretary of the Government of the Hong Kong Special Administrative Region, to join us today. May I now invite Mr. Wong to proceed to the stage and address the audience. Mr. Wong, please.
Vincent, Nancy, Victor, William Spencer, professors of Hong Kong UST and other esteemed educational institutes, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, a very good morning to you all. I'm pleased and honored to join you to celebrate the inauguration of the Hong Kong UST Li Fung Supply Chain Institute. So Nancy, do not worry. This institute is destined for a very bright future, and we enjoy phenomenal success. By combining the academic and research excellence of Hong Kong UST and the real-world expertise, and may I say the huge financial resource of Li Fung Group, if I can further add, the personal resource of Victor and William as well. This institute has an enormous edge in driving innovation and change, and in contributing to the development of Hong Kong, mainland China, and the world beyond. The establishment of the institute cannot be more timely. As geopolitical tensions continue to be worrying and impact all of us, the need for enterprises, especially those in mainland China, to manage risks through diversification, including restructuring their supply chains, is great and urgent. And Hong Kong is uniquely positioned to help these enterprises to overcome the challenges involved. The work of the Hong Kong UST Li Fung Supply Chain Institute will make Hong Kong even more effective and more attractive as a multinational supply chain management center. This morning, I would like to take a few minutes to share with you some recent and very positive developments about Hong Kong in areas that are relevant to our future in supply chain management. The first point that I would like to make is that going forward, Hong Kong's international character will remain unchanged. Yes, these are turbulent times, and yes, there are a lot of geopolitical tensions among us. But these would not affect our determination to continue to uphold and promote Hong Kong's status, identity, and values as an international city. Indeed, if we want to succeed as a multinational supply chain management center, it is imperative that Hong Kong continues to be international in a robust and proactive manner. In practical terms, it means that we'll continue to maintain an open economy where investors and businesses from all over the world will be welcomed with open arms. It means we endeavor to provide a business-friendly environment that is first class, where enterprises and individuals will compete on merit and ability, not on background or privilege. It means we adopt an approach that is externally rather than internally focused, so that we can effectively deal with the ever-changing challenges of the global economy. And of course, it means we'll continue to uphold and cherish the common law, which is our legal foundation, as well as the legal language of the global business community. My second point relates to how Hong Kong as an international city has been performing in terms of our ability to attract the best and the brightest. Indeed, for Hong Kong to be a successful multinational supply chain management center, we need leading enterprises, and we need talented people. About 18 months ago, the Hong Kong SAR government launched a series of initiatives to proactively attract overseas enterprises and talents, not just to come here to invest and work, but to build in Hong Kong a long-term future and to join us in a long-term partnership. I'm glad to report that our efforts have produced remarkable results. In the past 18 months, through the hard work of Invest Hong Kong and the Office for Attracting Strategic Enterprises to Hong Kong SAR government departments, we have attracted about 50 strategic enterprises, which together will bring to Hong Kong more than 40 billion Hong Kong dollars in investment and create in Hong Kong over 13,000 jobs, many of which in the innovation and technology area. They cover sectors that are perfectly aligned with our target of enhancing, well, this is a new term, new quality productive forces, 新質生產力, such as life and health technology, artificial intelligence, data science, fintech, advanced manufacturing, and new energy. And many of them we have great need for and synergy with supply chain management. Our efforts to attract international talents have also borne fruit. Since we launched a number of talent admission programs in late 2022, by the end of last month, we have received about 290,000 applications and have already approved over 60% of them. In fact, about 120,000 successful applicants have come to live in Hong Kong. The figures speak volumes. They tell us that enterprises and talents alike from different parts of the world see the value of Hong Kong and have confidence in Hong Kong. They are prepared to invest their resources and time and to build in Hong Kong their long-term future. Indeed, 120,000 talents, if I can focus on that for a moment, are the equivalent of 4 times the number of births in Hong Kong in a year. Last year, there were about 33,000 births in Hong Kong, 4 times that, in the space of about 18 months. So the figures are indeed very impressive and very encouraging. The third and last point that I would like to share this morning comes back to supply chain management. In February, in the latest budget by Mr. Paul Chan, the real financial secretary, not the acting one, the Hong Kong SAR government states the clear goal of developing Hong Kong into a multinational supply chain management center. We see huge potential for Hong Kong to leverage our unique strengths in areas such as trade finance, cross-border payments, consultancy services, and logistics, to name just a few examples, to assist enterprises to go global, especially for enterprises not having a lot of experience in operating across different economies. To fulfill this goal, we have put forward many concrete measures. And I would like to highlight 3 quick examples this morning. Don't worry, they will be quick. My first example, the Hong Kong TDC, the Hong Kong Trade Development Council, offers the Transformation Sandbox. They call it the T-Box, which offers one-stop consulting services covering market information, business operations, production processes, and of course, supply chain solutions. The T-Box will be of great value to enterprises that have wisely chosen to establish their regional headquarters in Hong Kong to manage their offshore trade and supply chains. My second example, trade financing. Hong Kong as an international financial center means that enterprises here will have excellent access to capital and various efficient and low-cost trade financing services. The Commercial Data Interchange, or CDI, offered by our Hong Kong Monetary Authority makes things even better for them. By allowing participating banks to quickly obtain key corporate data with the consent of the corporations themselves, CDI helps to streamline the loan assessment process and make it much more efficient to the great benefit of both banks and corporations. As at the end of last year, this win-win arrangement had facilitated more than 13,000 loan applications and assessments, involving an estimated credit approval of over 11.7 billion Hong Kong dollars. My third and last quick example relates to cross-border payments. Such payments are frequently associated with high costs, high settlement risks, low speed, and formidable operational complexities. In collaboration with 3 other central banks and the Bank of International Settlement, the Hong Kong Monetary Authority will soon launch Project mBridge. It is a platform among the participating central banks that will support the settlement of real value cross-border transactions using central bank digital currencies, or CBDC. Project mBridge will launch its first phase of service later this year, so it is coming, just around the corner. And Hong Kong will become one of the first places in the world to settle cross-border transactions using CBDC. With mBridge, it will be much faster and much less expensive for corporations that have a need to settle cross-border payments, which again is so crucial to supply chain management. Ladies and gentlemen, I can go on and on. I can do this all day, but you get the drift. The conclusion is clear. Hong Kong has what it takes to become a leading multinational supply chain management center. And the Hong Kong SAR government is determined to turn this into reality and will support it with bold and concrete actions. In this connection, the Hong Kong UST Li Fung Supply Chain Institute will be our most valuable and most trustworthy partner. We'll join hands with the Institute to take supply chain management in Hong Kong and beyond to the next level. In this positive spirit, may I wish the Institute a huge success that it so obviously deserves. And may I wish everyone here great health, good business, and rewarding research and study. Thank you all very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Wong. Please be seated. The supply chain industry is currently grappling with various challenges. Addressing these issues and identifying opportunities demand collaboration of academic experts and visionary industry leaders. This is the precise reason for the establishment of the HKUST Li Fung Supply Chain Institute. May I now invite Dr. Victor K. Fung, Group Chairman of Fung Group, to come on stage to share his words of wisdom with us. Dr. Fung, please.
Michael, Nancy, Vincent, William, distinguished guests, all the professors here, ladies and gentlemen, it's really wonderful to be here today and to see so many old friends and see some very nice new ones as well. Today, really a milestone for, I think, for the institute that we're establishing. I hope it's a milestone for Hong Kong, but I think it's a milestone for myself. This is really a tremendous event that would mark, I think, in the words of our acting financial secretary, the beginning of really putting Hong Kong on the map as the center for global supply chain management. As we all know, we have been practitioners in this area for at least 3 decades, ever since the economic opening of China. We have actually developed multiple practices by just kind of doing it in the trenches. And I see many of colleagues, that have really participated in that. I think for the first time, in conjunction now with Hong Kong UST, we're really now putting practice into theory. Not theory into practice. Practice into theory. And really developing a real intellectual underpinning for what we have been doing all these years. And at the same time, develop a framework to see how we can look at the evolution of global supply chains, especially in this very turbulent external environment. That, to me, is what it's all about. Of course, it is the obvious meeting of the scholastic world and the practitioner world, which goes without saying. And I think about half the room are academicians and half the room are practitioners. And I hope that you guys could mix. And I think there are not many. I've been an academic myself in the old days, and I've tried my hand at business also. And I must say, it's not easy in many fields to get practitioners and theoreticians together. But I think in business, and especially in this area of supply chains, I think they do mix. And I think it's important that we recognize that. So really, all the nice words about the opening of the Institute has actually been spoken by Nancy. Nancy, thank you very much for your partnership. We really look forward to this as really a tremendous new beginning. And really, most importantly, Michael, to you, for the support that the Hong Kong government has given us. Not only has you and the FS recognized this in the budget this year, but I think you have really cited some of the very important components that we really need to actually construct what is needed in the real world. I must say, I can go on and on also about how turbulent the world is today, but I think I will leave that to William Fung. Yeah, he would be talking to you about, I'm going to give you the good news. Yeah, and I must say, all joking aside, I think we are now at a point where it is actually essential for the world economy to recognize the changes in the pattern of global trade, unfortunately, because of geopolitical situations, and how we can actually integrate that into our practice. And what we're really now seeing is a total global fragmentation of the supply chains. And whereas it used to be, shall we say, the main trade routes were made in China, shipped to the US market, shipped to the European market, those are still the main trading components, if you would, in the global trading picture. But now it's not direct trade, it's indirect trade. It is totally fragmented. It is now going through, from China, the components, the machinery, through 40 countries. And then with appropriate amount of local content, so that under the WTO rules, you will get the local country of origin. And then shipped to the major markets. So now we're seeing a complete pattern of indirect trade instead of direct trade. So I think this really, shall we say, is the intellectual underpinning of what we see in the environment. Now that, of course, may evolve again. But I would say that for the next 5 years, maybe even 10, this is going to be the pattern. After that, there could be another scenario. And that's why we need an intellectual framework. So really, my hearty congratulations to the Hong Kong UST Li and Fung Supply Chain Institute. And as the acting FS has so rightly put it, you know, Hong Kong as a whole is a tremendous global practitioner of supply chain. We are the global supply chain management center. But I think it's important to have thought leadership behind that. And that's where, you know, really the Institute comes in. I hope this will be not only the local or even the regional thought leader, but hopefully the global thought leader in time that will underpin the future development of global supply chains, which is so much a part of all our lives. So finally, I really look forward to the development of the Institute and like to wish William Fung, Professor Tham Ka-yan, Professor Li Ching, and Chang Ka-man every success. You guys have the ball, so don't drop it. And then, last but not least, I'd like to make a special thanks to Professor Hao Li, who has been a professor at Stanford for many, many years, and in many circles is really known as the father of global supply chains. And he will be the chairman of the academic committee of the new institute. So thank you very much, and I wish the Institute every success. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Fung. May I ask you to please remain on stage? Thank you. So, to commemorate the establishment of the HKUST Li and Fung Supply Chain Institute, may I invite Dr. Fung and our guests of honor to unveil the plaque of the Institute. May I also invite to come on stage the following guests. First, the Honorable Michael Wong, Acting Financial Secretary of the Hong Kong SAR Government. Professor Nancy Ip, President of HKUST. Dr. the Honorable Vincent Lo, Honorable Court Chairman of HKUST. Dr. William Fung, Group Deputy Chairman of the Fung Group. Professor Ka-yan Tam, Dean of Business and Management of HKUST. Professor Hao Li, the Thoma Professor of Operations, Information and Technology Emeritus, Stanford University. Professor Ching Li, Director of the HKUST Li and Fung Supply Chain Institute. And last but not the least, Mr. Spencer Fung, Group Executive Chairman of Li and Fung. Wonderful. May I count in 3 to pull the string? Ready? 1, 2, and 3. Congratulations. May I ask all guests to stay in the position and let our photographers to record this special moment. Okay, great. Please stay on stage. May I invite the following distinguished guests to join us for another group photo. May I invite Mrs. Regina Ip, convener of the non-official members of the EXCO and LegCo member, to come on stage. And also Professor Albert Ip, HKUST court member and the chairman of the HKUST Foundation. Thank you very much. Congratulations again, and may all guests please be seated. As previously mentioned, the supply chain industry is currently facing numerous challenges, such as demand variability, supply disruptions, sustainability concerns, and cost pressures. To navigate these challenges successfully, the insight and experience of a seasoned industry leader are invaluable. It is now my privilege to invite Dr. William Fung. Dr. William Fung, Deputy Chairman of the Fung Group, to share his valuable insights with us. Dr. Fung, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Let me first add my own warm welcome to everyone attending this ceremony. It's really a great privilege and honor for us to have you all here. And I'd like to thank Nancy, Michael, who just departed, Victor, for all the remarks that preceded, what I'm going to say, which means I don't have to say very much. It's all being said. Having said that, when the school asked me to say something, the only advice they gave me was that don't make it too political. And unfortunately, I think the big elephant in the room, as far as supply chains are concerned, is really the geopolitical situation that we're facing today. So unfortunately, I'm going to put on I pretend to be an academic and have freedom of speech. So I hope nobody's going to hold this against the company, because really, it's not a matter of saying who's right or who's wrong, but how to deal with the realities on the ground. And I think that really the reality on the ground and the big elephant in the room is the geopolitical situation that we're all facing today. I don't think we're at a more tumultuous time than now in terms of global supply chains and our whole business, and in fact, all global trade in general. If you look at, people say that the most important bilateral relationship in the world is between the United States and China. And frankly, for global supply chains, that holds absolutely true as well. So there are many things I can talk about in terms of impacting the global supply chain. Technology, for example, impacts all businesses, but that's although moving very fast, this is still an evolutionary process. And then of course, as Victor mentioned, our firm, which is 118 years old this year, have been dealing with world trade and global supply chains ever since we started, but it was an evolution. What we see now actually is a fairly, I would say, abrupt break in what we've been used to for the last 40 or 50 years that I've been back in and doing business. Let me start first with the US-China relationship, and I think that really set the stage for modern supply chains, because it's really after Richard Nixon's visit to China in 1972 that the world's the two biggest economies in the world really had a détente and trade started flowing. I don't think that that moment can be underestimated in the way that the role that this relationship between these two great countries have in terms of promoting globalization at that time. It was also a great year because 1972 was the year I came back to work in Hong Kong. So that was the beginning of my career in Hong Kong. But in any case, we all know what followed. Following the 1972 meeting between Richard Nixon, Kissinger, and the détente with Mao Zedong and the Chinese government, then we followed with Deng Xiaoping's opening up of China, 1979. Again, another tremendous event that set the stage for the economic miracle of China that we all know. In fact, everyone in the room probably experienced it in one way or the other. The opening up of China in 1979 then subsequently led to such a burst of activity. 1.4 billion people at that time joined the world's workforce. It's a complete disruption to world trade flows, for the better, I would say, as we can look back now and say that those were the golden years of global supply chains. And those golden years, really lasted about 40 years. And that was the period where we built our company. That's the period where the world got together. That was the period where the world was flat, according to Friedman. And Victor and I wrote our book. We actually named our book Competing in the Flat World. Unfortunately, the world is not so flat anymore. When we look at the challenges that we're facing today, I really think that the origins of that really, I would say, started in 1907-08. Okay, that was the global financial crisis. And what started wasn't the crisis itself, but I think China fared well. They fared very well during that crisis. I think that led to a change in situation between the balance of political and other perceptions and power in the world. In 1907-08, China did very well. That I think it led somewhat to a lot of confidence in China in terms of its role in the world. And as a result, it became, I would say, more assertive. I wouldn't use the word hubris, but there certainly was a lot of confidence in that China was doing the right thing, its system was correct, that it was basically a big change in the perception that China have of the rest of the world, and probably of the world, especially the United States, on China. I think that was the period where China started its 14 five-year plan. They basically had this idea of a made in China 2025. And for China to announce that it has intentions over this 5-year plan to dominate the world in all the new technologies and businesses, the green economy, the green energy, the change in energy, all the things of quantum. I think it was a bit of a shock to a lot of other countries around the world. Along with that, then you've coupled it with a confidence overflowing into being called, the diplomacy being wolf warriors, and so on. And I think that really provoked a reaction from the dominant world power at that time, the United States. And that's when we went into the Trump era. And as you know, the Trump era was beginning of really a very changed dynamic in the whole world. Of course, it's been brewing for a while. Of course, America realizes that China is coming up fast, and China is looking for perhaps its rightful place in the world. But more importantly, I think the United States is now reacting to it. And with Mr. Donald Trump, we had first of all, as you know, there was a bit of change in America's own attitude with the rest of the world. America withdrew from the TPP, amongst other things. I'm just focusing on the trade area, and of course the Section 301 punitive duties against China began to set in. 25% tariffs, The use of tariffs has been universally denounced by the academic community for decades. And that seems to be, however, Mr. Trump's favorite countermeasure, to the rise of China. And that obviously changed the dynamics of the relationship between America and China quite fundamentally. And there was hope at the end of the Trump presidency that with the Biden presidency, that there might be a change. Unfortunately, that did not happen. I think for all kinds of reasons, again, I'm not going to say who's right, who's wrong. The Biden administration basically carried on with the Trump attitude towards trade and China in particular. And the tariffs were continued. Not only that, but I think the Biden administration added on sanctions. I think some of us in this room were affected very much by sanctions, which was much more specific, non-tariff barrier that is even more difficult to counter. As all my friends and all the professors would say, and here we were operating, I'm a practitioner, we were operating for 40 years under the aegis of David Ricardo, that the reason why we have efficient supply chains is because of comparative advantage, because we economically, we can do things better, faster, etc. That was the way that the existing supply chains were built, based on practical dimensions of efficiency, and for the great benefit of the world. I think nobody would dispute that those years of globalization for the world were very good for everyone. Of course, including China especially. The lifting of the millions and millions of people out of poverty. And I would say that was the period where my firm Li Fung built its business, and around the idea of efficient supply chains, quick response, going to the best places in the world where it should be, where production should be done, going to the place in the world where raw materials should be taken out of the ground, etc. It was a very comfortable world for expeditions. That this is something we know about. We can do it. And then even the impact of technology, we can still see that coming. What we didn't see coming, of course, was the whole geopolitical dimension. And we realized with this change in the relationship between the two world's greatest economies, that the world was no longer flat. So we're now at that point where what can we do about it, and what's going to happen? Let me first start with a scenario where I think what we see happening, and I'd like to pick up on where Victor left off, which is really now the smooth evolution of and fast evolution of supply chains, based on real economics, based on real efficiencies and so on, are now given way to a great extent to navigating all the obstacles that's been put in the way of global supply chains because of the rivalry between the great powers. We really have I like to say one of the trends, I like to identify for everyone a trend that we see happening that will affect the whole world, and it has to do with Victor's point about indirect trade. And the other one is Hong Kong's role, very quickly, Hong Kong's role. Later on, we have many speakers, including the panel under How, we'll look at this, and some of our very bright professors from Hong Kong UST will talk about some of the ramifications of that, including other factors like technology. But let me just, because of the limited time I have, just focus on the biggest thing that I have to contend with. We basically went through a period of the world where the supply chains were built on, as I said, on efficiency, and not around the obstacles imposed by political will. And so, I would say that during that period, the world benefited. In fact, America benefited. All the Western world benefited. One of my most fond sayings is that when I first started working with the Gap stores in 1980, they were selling jeans for $28 a pair. Today, they are selling jeans for $28 a pair. If you go to Old Navy, it's $18 a pair. That's the benefit of global trade in terms of helping the standard of living really around the world. So it's not one side lose, the other side gains. It's really a mutually beneficial situation. So we're now at a point where the realities that we are facing is that there are a lot of obstacles. And one of the impacts is, of course, on America as the greatest trading power and maybe manufacturing power in the world today, is that they will be very much impacted. Especially daunting and perhaps scary is the pronouncements of the two candidates now coming up to the American elections. You know, Donald Trump and Biden rematch, and they're talking about things like 60% duties, maybe more. And of course, Mr. Biden recently came through, with something that I thought, I don't know if you realize how disruptive this sort of statement is. 100% duty on electric vehicles, which America doesn't really produce and doesn't even import. It's a preemptive tariff on something that's never happened yet. I don't know if you guys seen this movie about preventing crime that's happening in the future. This is sort of that kind of scenario. It's really kind of scary. I could see that if things are bad and the trade deficit comes out and there's a need, and going back to the academics idea of things like protecting infant industries in your country, okay, and then the traditional definition of dumping, I think we can deal with all of that. We know how to deal with that. But to have preemptive tariffs against something that hasn't happened yet, I mean, that is really something new. And I think that's really something that we should be very concerned about. But anyway, so it is scary going forward. And in fact, I would say that as an operating company, and as I always look at myself as an operator, not as an academic, is that the one question that I give to the next generation who's running the company now, Spencer and Joseph and his whole team, is that what will we do if those tariffs and all those threats really come in? Every company should have a contingency plan because it's not that far away. November is not that far away. And anything that is promulgated by the new administration will impact us for sure in 2025 and beyond. And I would say for, I don't know how long, I hope it won't be that long, for a number of years. But I think it has everything to do with the terms that have been bandied about. For example, the reason why I think this geopolitical focus is so important is because the geopolitics is really a decision by governments that could be changed or intensified overnight. And therefore you really hard to plan. For example, you know that all the terms they were talking about when they were countering China's rise in the world and so on, things like taking your trade and look at it as reshoring, nearshoring, friendshoring. Okay, all of that, okay, must have a fundamental economic underpinning, otherwise it won't last. Why would you put up a factory, for example, in the United States, if suddenly one administration says that, okay, it's okay now, we don't have these 60% punitive duties or whatever, you end up with an obsolete factory in America, that it doesn't conform to any economic principles or why it should be there. So for all those reasons, I think we're now entering a part of the time, with supply chains where we need a lot of thinking about how we're going to formulate the supply chains of the future. Now, one area that I'd like to go a little bit more specific into is really China's response. Okay, it's very clear that these unilateral actions by the major importing country and perhaps with other like-minded countries, that comprises the major markets for a lot of China's exports, have to be dealt with. When I talked about the impact of Made in China 2025 and so on, okay, I think the first reaction from China and the Chinese government was that, well, is it really that serious? Do we care? We have a very large domestic market. We have 350 million to 400 million middle class, which is the size of America. Why would we be so concerned? Okay, and then that Mr. Xi Jinping, talked about this concept of the dual circulation, internal circulation, external circulation. The internal circulation surely must be robust and strong enough to carry us through this. Well, it seems like now, after a few years of reacting that way, it has not, the domestic consumption has not picked up the way that I think the Chinese government hoped it will. Coupled then with the problems of indebtedness and the real estate problems, okay, that the relying on the internal circulation to basically see China through this period of difficulty is going to be it has not worked so far. So guess what? We're now back to the external. the external circulation. And the external circulation, as far as foreign direct investment is concerned, same thing as trade. Big curtailment of investments by America on the investments into China and from China into the United States. CFIUS and so on. Many of you are familiar with these concepts. So I think we're back to trade again. And if you look at trade, although we talk a lot about the rise of the rest of the world in terms of consumption, the real consumption still for the next 5-10 years is still the United States and Western Europe, because there the consumption is organized. It's organized, accessible consumption. That's where you deal with 40 or 50 of the large companies in America. You've got that consumption market. Contrast that with India, which may be a very big market, but it's 20 million small wholesalers and retailers, not accessible yet. So we're back to now, how do you deal with the big markets of US and Europe if you're a Chinese manufacturer? So what we predict, what we see happening, is really what Victor referred to, is an exodus of world-class Chinese manufacturers, to really transform their manufacturing base, from China to third countries. And it's and if you think about it, it's really I'm actually in a pessimistic scenario. I'm actually quite optimistic that this move actually is to the benefit of almost all the stakeholders, in world trade. Let me enumerate them. First of all, for the Chinese side, let's talk about the Chinese companies. First of all, a lot of these Chinese companies have been supplying the US and Western markets with state-of-the-art, basically world-beating, production, and so on. And they basically need to keep the US and the European markets going to sustain that. But they've been forced now to move probably earlier than they hoped. But the demographics were already against them staying. As many of you know, especially the practitioners of international trade and supply chains know, a lot of times you're the victim of your own success. When I first came back in Hong Kong in 1972, my friends asked me, at that time Hong Kong's rely on exports, a lot of labor-intensive exports, to America and the rest of the world. And they said, William, why did you come back? We're finished here. Our wages are too high. And then they said, it's all gone to Taiwan. So for sure, I talked to our customers, and we went to Taiwan, and we started an operation in Taiwan in order to capture that business. And guess what? My own new staff came to me after 6 months and says, Mr. Fung, we don't know why you've come to Taiwan. We finished here. Everything's gone to Korea. And then they go to Southeast Asia. So it's a movable feast, and China's no exception. The last time I talked to a manufacturer in Shanghai, quite recently, he said, Mr. Fung, we can't compete with the Bangladeshis and the Pakistanis of this world. So it's happening, but it was much slower. It's evolutionary. We could deal with it. Now this is an abrupt break, and we need to move very quickly. So what I think is that the Chinese factories that's been top of this game is going to move, and they're going to move. There will be an exodus. It will be a big move, and they will be setting up plants in other parts of Southeast Asia, South Asia, maybe all the way to Africa, maybe even close to the big markets like Mexico. You probably read about this all the time in the news. So as far as I'm concerned, that diaspora of Chinese manufacturing prowess and expertise will continue. And that's the way that they will survive this. And it's not bad. In terms of what, if you can imagine, these factories, although they are moving and they have to move, and maybe it is going to be troublesome and more costly for them in the beginning, eventually they will have established manufacturing bases in some of the fastest growing developing markets of the world. First to do exports to America and to Europe, but later on maybe to supply the domestic market. So in the long term, it's really not bad for this stakeholder. Now, what about China, the state as a stakeholder? Well, you know that there's a lot of talk for many years now about the Belt and Road Initiative. China has invested trillion. Their own estimates about a trillion RMB. It's probably more like a trillion US dollars. But there's not a lot to show for it. It's always government directed, everything else. So you can imagine that if this diaspora starts to happen, the natural movement of these factories will be along the Belt and Road. Okay, it'll be using the capacity and the technology, the infrastructure that's been built up by the BRI, by the Belt and Road Initiative, and it'll be a very simple. It'll be a very simple thing for them to be able to use this infrastructure, and now the benefits of the BRI will really be apparent, okay, to China as well as other countries. On top of that, okay, I think what you will see is a rise in China of the what I call the 中企, the medium-sized companies who are really the backbone of China's export machine, and the rise of these more specialized, world-class, middle-sized companies will create a new backbone for China in terms of going forward. I liken it to something like the Mittelstand in Germany. If China have many of these, thousands and thousands of these Mittelstand companies that have operations, world-class operations in the developing countries, you could imagine how much more resilient and sustainable that ecosystem is, instead of just a couple of new Jack Ma's, very big. Okay, and I think it fits better with the whole political philosophy of a socialist country like China, is to have this big mass of middle-sized companies. So that's, for that stakeholder, I think it works and it's very good. And then what about the host countries? The host countries will now get knowledge transfer, manufacturing knowledge transfer from China, which is at the top of their production power. Okay, although you may say that, well, they may be doing the more labor-intensive stuff and so on, but eventually that would come. Don't forget the migration of supply chains. When China first opened up, guess what? They only supplied labor. You remember the special economic zones along the coast? We brought the raw materials from Korea, Japan, Taiwan, everywhere into China. But eventually the supply chains moved into China. So along with this diaspora, you're going to see now a movement of these supply chains out of China, but the first parts will be the country of origin conferring, the part that Victor alluded to. It will be legal under WTO rules at least. It will be absolutely legal. And it would be using still a lot of China's original upstream supply chain inside China. So they're not losing that much. They could still use China's incredible supply chain system that have been built up in the last 40 years, to supply now the factory floors, which might be in other countries around the world. So I think that that as far as the host countries are concerned, they get this knowledge transfer, they do exports, they have employment, a lot of employment. A lot of these industries, at least when I was doing it in things like apparel and so on, is the first rung up the development ladder of a lot of these economies as they transition from agricultural to a manufacturing economy. And so they'll get a lot of that kind of employment. Okay, and on top of that, they will earn foreign exchange. What's there not to like, about this diaspora? So I think that stakeholder would be very much on side with this move. So with all these stakeholders, really, I think benefiting from this diaspora, we actually predict that this will be the next big wave. In fact, with the BRI, we would call this the second wave, BRI of the Belt and Road Initiative, the second wave. Now, coming back to Hong Kong, okay, as Nancy talked about, Michael talked about, Victor talked about this. Hong Kong is in the perfect position to be the platform for this diaspora of Chinese companies and manufacturers moving out. Okay, we have the people, very important. The big difference between, for example, Singapore and Hong Kong is that Singapore never went through this phase of manufacturing development and working with China that the Hong Kong people have. I agree with Michael, this injection of the new immigrants is quite incredible. I think these are all we have the talent now, of supporting this kind of platform. We certainly have the financial infrastructure. The trade finance will come into play as the supply chains gets more stretched again. When the supply chains were all in China, okay, international trade finance did not play a role because everything is done domestically. But now the supply chains are stretched out again between China on the upstream and the rest of the manufacturing world. Okay, the whole area, the whole plethora of international trade finance needs to come into place. together with our expertise on things like trade insurance. You know, I mean, the Hong Kong ECIC, the Sino Show in China, will all have to play a role in this sort of regeneration of trade to indirect trade. And there'll be a lot of need for this sort of financial services. So coupled, and by the way, one of the things that people have forgotten about is that the trading, the export trading and commercial sector is as big as the financial sector in Hong Kong, each accounting for about 20% of Hong Kong's GDP. And in fact, in terms of employment, it's more. You know, the trading community in Hong Kong accounts for more employment in Hong Kong than the financial sector. So anyway, but these are two pillars, two of our main pillars of our economy. I think will have a tremendous impact from this move. You know, and then the last and not the least is our intellectual firepower. You know, I think Victor's always fond of saying that whenever he talks to academics in China, they will say that, oh, we have some great universities. Number one is Beida, you know, Tsinghua, so on. And guess what? They forgot about our Hong Kong. Hong Kong is part of China, right? As everyone keeps saying. They forget all about our tertiary institutions in China. You know, we are part of China, and we are amongst the top in the world. If anything, you know, I think this is something that is now, we will hopefully see a uniting of this. You know, it's really all these aspects I talked about. And then I think that if you look at Hong Kong as a platform, you know, to go out, you know, given our legal system, our financial system, and the least of which is maybe even the low tax jurisdiction that we have. You know, for all those reasons, Hong Kong presents a language, you know, and so on, and talent. You know, Hong Kong presents the ideal base. And within Hong Kong, you know, I think we're so happy to partner with Hong Kong UST. We think that this is at least one of many, you know, the tertiary institutions that will be very much providing us with the intellectual firepower, you know, and in terms of basically having the knowledge and pushing the frontier of the knowledge of supply chain management. And of course, you know, in the end, we're also talking about teaching. We also talk about educating, you know, our compatriots in China who needs to go out for training, executive training, and so on. All that is ideal, Nancy. And we're looking forward for this institution to play all those roles that we never had when we had this think tank, you know, on supply chains within the company. So I hope that has not been too boring. When they first make some remarks about supply chains, I said, what could be more boring than talk about supply chains? But anyway, thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Dr. William Fung. Please be seated. Up next, we will have a panel discussion session that promises to be insightful and enriching. We are honored and grateful to have three distinguished industry and academic leaders joining us as panelists today. Their wealth of experience and knowledge will undoubtedly provide valuable insights and perspectives, enabling us to gain a deeper understanding of the current stage in the supply chain industry. Through this session, we aim to explore industry from various angles and uncover new opportunities. Without further ado, I would like to invite our esteemed panelists to the stage. First, Mr. Andy Tong, Managing Partner of QB&N Capital. Thereafter, we have Mr. Joseph Fee, Group Chief Executive Officers of Li Fung. Then we have Professor Christoph Locke, Professor of Operations and Technology Management of Cambridge Judge Business School. Last but not the least, we are honored to have Professor Hao Li, the Thoma Professor of Operation, Information and Technology, Emeritus, Stanford University, as our moderator for this discussion. Please join me in welcoming our panelists and the moderator.
Well, good morning. It's my pleasure to be a part of this very important and exciting event. So after the distinguished speakers before this panel, there is hopefully still something exciting and interesting to add. Yeah, good. Well, I'm a Hong Kong-born person, so I'm very privileged to be a part of the new initiative here, even though I have lived in the US for a long, long time. But I do want to contribute. Now, maybe I would start with the general background. This institute will hopefully follow what Victor and William describe as disruptions happening, and we have to navigate. And how can we navigate? Hopefully there will be research, there will be collaboration with industry practitioners. And today, I want to start with asking each of our panelists to share some of their views on how they have heard and maybe they have talked to their customers, suppliers, and their peers on how companies are indeed responding to the disruptions and the frictions that we are observing. At the same time, when people need to navigate, don't forget that the title of this theme is Challenges and Innovations. So what can we do to innovate? When companies move to Bangladesh, it's not a duplication of the pure labor-intensive factory. Maybe there could be innovations that happen. Maybe we also can make use of the emerging markets as a source of innovations. So I also hope that our panelists can talk about, well, is it only just migration, or migration can also instill innovative ideas and designs that we can leverage? Yeah. And finally, it's very important that we have a socially responsible and environmentally responsible supply chain. When we move to Bangladesh, to Mexico, and so on, we should also at the same time make sure that we have sustainable supply chain as well. So these are the general topics that I want to ask our panelists to freely first give some comments before I would ask perhaps more specific questions, as well as inviting our guests to ask questions. Now, for the final portion, we need our helpers to make sure that we would pass along some of the microphones, and you can stand up and state your name to ask questions to our panelists. So the first round is to let our panelists to share. And in fact, your sharing can also inspire our colleagues, academic colleagues, to say, hey, that's the kind of research that would be useful for us to do, because that's what our distinguished panelists said is important. Yeah, that's what William said is important. Then we all would want to move to do those kind of research. So this is my round of introduction, but maybe I'll start with asking, first of all, Andy and Joseph has been in the industry leadership position for a long time, and so they know, they interact daily with industry executives. Christoph Locke was the former dean of the Judge School at Cambridge. And so he directs also a lot of the researchers within the Judge School on how they should pursue research. But in addition, he personally is the top expert on how to help companies to innovate. So innovation is kind of his DNA. So three of you would be able to share with us in this very short time. So Andy, could you start?
Okay, thank you, Professor Hao. And first off, thank you very much for this opportunity and honor to participate in this event, and congratulations for the establishment of this institute. Yeah, my name's Andy Tong. Yeah, I'm introduced as QBN Capital. I'm doing some venture capital work now, but most of my life was spent in transportation in ocean container shipping. So maybe I'll just make a few quick comments. First thing, I think I just want to kind of react to Dr. William Fung's comments about how for a long time we've been operating sort of under a pretty stable environment that is now suddenly sort of jolted out of place, if you will. And so I would definitely kind of concur with that in terms of container shipping. You know, when I was asked to join this panel, I thought about kind of what aspects to talk about, and I think two things that kind of jump into my mind. One is over the past short period of time, I would say there are some very unexpected, surprising events that we ended up having to deal with because of the geopolitics. And then there is very big impact on sort of long-term planning and challenges to the basic economic model on how we as a container shipping company kind of serves our customers and hopefully make a return. In terms of these unexpected events, for example, when the Ukraine war happened, and very, very quickly, many companies started to exit Russia. We have a whole team there. We had thousands of containers operating inside the territory. What do you do? How do you immediately manage that? These types of things you don't really plan for, where suddenly you have to, in a very short period of time, exit a country. How do you do this? Other events, when the Houthis started shooting at the ships, we had to react also very quickly for the safety of our crew, of course, first and foremost, but also sort of the safety of the vessel and the cargo. And so now the industry has had to sort of reroute all of their ships around South Africa, extending transit times, putting completely different demands on the resources that we have, whether it's ships, whether it's containers, completely changing the sort of, at least the short-term operating planning, hugely disruptive. So having to very quickly react to these types of situations. I'll just share one more example. Again, something that hasn't happened yet, but apparently there's talk in the U.S. government and Congress about potentially imposing a ship tax. So basically, any container vessel that is built in China could potentially be hit with a $1 million charge every time it calls at a U.S. port. So these sort of issues are unthinkable, all this time, and has huge impact on sort of the short-term operating plans. So these are just some of the examples, I think, as Dr. William Fung talked about, we're operating in a certain environment, and now we're suddenly jolted out of this. There are a lot of issues that come up that practitioners have to deal with. As a container shipping company, we're fortunate that our assets are movable. We basically just follow wherever our customers, wherever the cargo is, wherever our customers move to. We're fortunate that we can move the ships around. And unlike the airline industry, there aren't really traffic rights, related. So we can move our assets around and service that demand. But having said that, there are a lot of other issues that really impact the long term. So the container shipping industry is capital intensive. Up until at least 5 years ago, it was still relatively thin margin and very cyclical. And so the industry has been pushing for economies of scale as a key competitive element. The industry has been consolidating, and everyone is pushing for bigger ships, pushing for sort of larger scale operation, if you will. Now, in a world where vast majority of the cargo is coming out of China, and ports like Shanghai, Ningbo, Shenzhen, Hong Kong are all very, very well equipped, the industry very quickly moved towards very large size ships. But now we're talking about fragmentation. Now we're talking about having to source in different areas. Not every container port in the world is capable of taking the largest size ships right now. And so customers will come to us and say, we need to start looking at different locations. The port, the water depth at the port, the crane size available at the different ports, the infrastructure that's available in the different countries, vastly different. And so while I think the industry over the past many years has been, the container industry has been pushing towards large scale in order to drive down the unit economics, now we're going to have to start doing a lot more hub and spokes, hub and spokes means you need smaller vessels. Well, the industry has basically been building larger vessels. There's going to be a shortage, there could be a shortage of smaller vessels, for example. Or it could be certain ports in Southeast Asia, the water depth is, not quite as deep. So the vessels that are in the market right now, particularly the large ones, are of draft deeper depth. So all of these types of issues will come into play, and I think add a lot of complexity, add a lot of or kind of push away from the kind of scale economics, if you will. So I think these are all issues that in the longer term, I think certainly the container shipping industry will have to look into. One other thing I think I'll just mention is there's now a huge sensitivity to how we handle data. We collect a lot of our customers' data. There's a lot of interaction with the different governments in terms of customs data and what have you. And there's more and more and more sensitivity about how we handle the data, where the data is stored, what can be moved in and out of which geography. These are all issues that are relatively newer for the industry that we have to start dealing with. So maybe let me just stop there and give.
Well, thanks, Andy. This is great. What it meant is that while it's easy to say, well, China, you should migrate. You could move to Vietnam, you could move to Cambodia. It's not so simple because it's not just a simple transfer that you have to look at the logistics implications and the risk associated with it and so on. Yeah. So that's a great set of comments that you have, Andy. Thank you. Joseph?
Good morning, everyone. Congratulations to Hong Kong UST for this very important initiative. By the way, I used to teach at Hong Kong UST as an adjunct professor. Before William Fung gave me more work, that I decided that, well, it's too much for me. I need to take a leave of absence.
You have to come back.
So, with regard to the question, so 40 years leading to 2019, the name of the game is about cost optimization. So all the companies, they would went on great lengths just to squeeze every cost out of the system. And then when COVID happens, with the rising political tension, with the rising market volatility, then cost optimization gave way to risk mitigation. So it's risk mitigation first, and then cost optimization. So it's about resiliency first before efficiency. So with that as a backdrop, let me share with you some of the trends I've observed over the last few years. The first one, it's about everybody is now diversifying. The clothing retailer that William talked about, that retailer spends hundreds of millions of dollars during COVID because they're too exposed in one country, Vietnam. And when Vietnam shut down, they're left exposed. And so think about this, if right now Vietnam has a free trade agreement with EU, what if that is revoked? What happens? So right now, everyone is trying to diversify their sourcing and production base. And that's given us a lot of advantage being a company with a global network. We're in more than 40 countries and jurisdictions. And that's something that, as we streamlined the organization during the COVID years, one thing we didn't do is that we didn't cut our network. In fact, we expanded. We're now even in remote areas in Africa. The second thing that we have observed is this age-old problem as to how people manage inventory. Anybody who can crack the code, crack this nut, will make a lot of money. So the biggest cost facing a retailer is inventory obsolescence, and inventory markdowns. So the perennial question faced by retailer is that what is the right inventory? What is the right level of inventory? And I've seen huge progress in these two areas. Let's talk about the right inventory. So in the past, you send designers. Designers will go to Milan, New York. They go to Tokyo. They join fashion shows. What's in the runway? They come back and they do their designs. At best, during the time, the adoption rate probably would be between 10, 15%. You're a genius if you get to 20%. Today, that runway is giving way to social media. So the way people do design right now is that they look at what people are posting in TikTok, in Instagram. What are the people saying in the chat rooms? What are the people searching with Google Trends? And then you triangulate. So we have a design team that's so data-centric. And with the use of Gen AI, we are able to increase the adoption rate to at least 60%. So think about the impact. Minimal inventory, environmental damage because you're able to manufacture the right inventory, and minimum markdowns. The second thing that there's a huge progress in the area is that a lot of retailers, they now are implementing a strategy called postponement. So within a season, in the past, they will give a huge orders, and it's a hit or miss. Hopefully that these orders will resonate with the consumers. Today, they place initial order good enough for the launch, and depending on the offtake, depending on whether it's received well by the consumers, then they place replenishment, in our industry called the chase orders. So it's now prompting a lot of people like ourselves to have quick response. Again, this has beneficial impact in terms of the amount of inventory you keep, as well as minimum damage to the environment. Because the moment that you write off inventory, you just have to destroy them. The final thing that I'm seeing is ESG. It's now a ticket to the game. Used to be that it's a nice thing to have. It's now a ticket to the game. Europe is very important partners for us. We sell a lot to Europe. Europe is leading the way. I'm so glad Europe is leading the way. So today, every product that you produce, you've got to be able to trace, and you've got to be able to do due diligence on how much carbon footprint did you produce in doing this product. And it's something for people interested, for the academics interested. It's something which we have done so much in terms of the traceability and in terms of the visibility. So these are some of the trends, and that we can discuss and double-click each one of them later.
Well, thank you, Joseph. So what you said actually gave me a lot of ideas for our academic colleagues. So how do you do postponement well? How do you do the right sizing of inventory? How do you make use of the modern technologies for traceability, IoT? So that's lots of potential in academic research that we can do. So it's wonderful to have you back, and hopefully William will give you a little more time to teach. Okay, Christoph.
All right, thank you very much. It's my privilege to be here. Nice to meet you all. I'm looking at supply chains and their changes as one very important example of innovation. New things of how you deliver whatever you sell to your customers. And in innovation, you always balance future benefits, which are often uncertain, and the cost that you have to pay now. And in innovation, if you're doing it under duress, because of a catastrophic event that is happening around you now, then the cost dominates and you're just trying to survive. If you have time to go after the future benefits, then you can do better and you can really look for the upside value. William, what you said comes in, where you observed that we thought we are building supply chains for efficiency, and now we're doing these stupid things because of the geopolitical situation. That's very true. Power has always trumped efficiency, at least in the short run, throughout history. And that is still true today. And so we are seeing changes in supply chains under duress because of power. So I live in the UK right now. And the boneheaded move by the UK to Brexit, which was announced in 2016, before the UK actually left the European Union, that was 2024 years. And in those 4 years, before anything happened, supply chains reconfigured, and people didn't source from the UK anymore or delivered in a different way. And because there was time, companies were able to do it, relatively efficiently. What was the loser was the UK economy. So this really had a negative impact. But the supply chain innovation that companies were able to do for the companies was actually, partially even value creating. Another example is the Ukraine. You already mentioned that earlier. There is now data that we have of the first Ukrainian war when Russia took the Crimea, 2014. And I've just seen a study that looked at data which says, then also supply chains had to move, out of Russia, but also around Ukraine to a certain degree. They did an analysis and they found that this radiated out and affected suppliers quite distant from the Ukraine, and caused cost increases in supply chains by in the order of 20%. Because it happened under duress, we didn't have the time to actually do something efficient. Now 20% cost increase in the supply chain, that is a big impact. Now the supply chain cost, of course, is only a part of the total cost, but that's a big impact. So that's an example that when you do something because power actually trumped efficiency, that the damage can be very, very great. And that's what's happening now because of the very rapid decoupling and the tariffs, that we're seeing. It really causes a lot of inefficiency. And in the long run, that causes pressure for this to be undone. Now this is nothing new. So for example, when the Ming Emperor in China decided at some point that we are no longer dealing with the outside world, and we keep them all out, that was a power move for political expediency, which had devastating effects on the economic stature of China in the world, 500-600 years ago. So the costs of this are very significant, but they play out in the longer term. And that's the difference. But in the short run, power always dominates. Yeah, and we have known this for a very long time. So what companies can do in supply chains is, you already, mentioned some of the trends. One of them is decentralization. There are positive words for this, decentralization rather than fragmentation, which is a negative word. So, I'm currently working with a Chinese battery manufacturer, and they are building plants in different parts of the world, in India, in Thailand, in Mexico, and the pressure to build a factory in Mexico was already there before the current decoupling, because if you have a presence close to the biggest market where you are, then you can deliver faster, you can have variants of what you're doing that are closer to the tastes of the customers there. And so the pressure for that, has always been there, but that will increase now because of the decoupling. And if you have to do it too suddenly, then it will cause inefficiency. If you have time to do it, then you can emphasize the benefits from it, which is learning from the market, being closer to the market, having variants for the market. With new technologies, some of those factories have very little manpower, with automation. These factories will be little China in Mexico. It will be the application of Chinese technologies in order to deliver something where you actually don't need very much, local labor. It's all engineering, that comes from, from your home location. And then there is a really, really big upside. And it plays over time, what the effect is that this will have. So the trends are, indeed going, in that direction of localization, of local content, and of manufacturing. The physical goods are only a piece of what you do. The service component, the elements of, the product is only a piece of what you're really selling to the client. That will also increase, which is again only a continuation of something that we have seen for the last 50 years. But even when you have predominantly services where physical goods are only a piece of it, even then you are subject to disruptions from power and from political decoupling. When we look at what's happening to TikTok in the United States today, there is no manufacturing. It is a service which is the result of ideas of platforms where China has innovated in ways which in the US they hadn't figured out yet. So, the revolution of TikTok, of influencing and social interactions in ways, took the US by storm. But because of decoupling, even that is now under danger. So political decoupling isn't only affecting physical supply chains, but also intellectual service, social supply chains, and the application of decoupling will have a very negative effect on everybody, and the people who will suffer the most are ultimately the customers, who will see that certain services are no longer available or cost of their products are going up. Companies will continue to cope by being flexible and by innovating, but really it's a lose-lose game.
Oh, thank you, Christoph. Now, I'm just going to raise one question, and then I hope that there will be from the audience who also can ask the panelists questions. This one question is for all three of you. I think in navigating this very difficult kind of a turbulence, companies need to react. But the reaction has a risk of overreaction. As William said, that not everyone should open a factory in everywhere. And Andy, you cannot just immediately overnight build lots and lots of small ships. And in addition to your large ships, and under duress, you act, and sometimes that action could be dangerous if you move too much to the extreme. So a few years ago, when COVID-19 hits, lots of shortages. And so there are a lot of consultants, McKinsey and Deloitte, everyone says that we should abandon just in time, we should move to just in case. And just in case was very popular. Everyone just in case. What is just in case? Well, just in case set up a factory in India, set up a factory in Vietnam, set up a factory in Mexico. Wow, that's duplication and just overreaction. How can we balance the need to react and yet not to overreact?
If you talk about a horizon of 10 years, I think the implication is that companies should react. Companies are, in general, much more flexible than economies. So companies can, over the course of 10 years, you make an investment decision, the payback is 5 years. Clearly the answer is, in 5 years you improve your flexibility in order to respond to, to localization or local content needs. For the economy, I think the effects of this are much more negative than for companies, because you can unwind something if you build it with the appropriate safeguards relatively quickly. So I think companies need to react. You cannot say to a company, you wait for 10 years and then this will open up again. Economies may do this, companies need to react. And you use technologies, you use contracting, with technologies, with information technology, automation, the flexibility of companies is very large indeed. So over a time of 10 years, I think the answer to that is pretty clear.
One of the companies I truly admire is an animation company called Pixar. And one of the co-founders of Pixar, Ed Catmull, I had a fortune to meet with him. He said that failure is asymmetrical with respect to time. So which means that a lot of people, entrepreneurs, successful entrepreneurs and CEOs and the C-suites, they're saying the reason I'm here today is because of all the failures I've experienced, all the mistakes I've made. But once they made it, they do everything possible not to fail. So there's this contrast in there. So my suggestion is not about overreacting. I think as a company, we need to continue doing experimentation. So if you look at the two bubbles, there's a bubble of experience, all the things that we have accumulated over the years, and there's a bubble called experiment. So this experience, experiment. The intersection of the two bubbles That's the risk that you need to take. So it's risk mitigated. So as you take that risk, you know that you know when to give up, when just to persist. 什么时候要坚持，什么时候放手. So that's the thing that I think we need to be aware of. Once you proactively do this, you're in good shape. You don't need to just underreact or overreact. Continuing to do that rapid experimentation. And as a company, as Spencer has left, this is something that he has championed. How do we do pockets of experimentation so that when things change, you're ready?
You would never truly overreact in that sense, right? Because you would be able to see the signals and be able to give up at the right time. Yeah, Andy, especially for container ships.
Well,
I always worried about container ships.
I would just supplement what Joseph has just said. I think, particularly in this day and age, I mean, I think the ability to collect information, kind of to get feedback is better than it was before. And so the whole mentality of sort of, I guess these days people always say, take an agile approach, right? So test concepts, take small steps, test, see if it works. So I think that's on a macro basis. I think that's a very important kind of mindset that you have to have. That's one thing, and I think also just in a very uncertain environment, I would be a little bit careful of taking very big bets. Probably do a number of small bets, none of which will sink you, but hopefully you make a larger percentage of winning bets than losing bets, because you're going to have both. And then I think in my industry, historically, what we would do is try to partner. A lot of times when you find the right partners, you're able to kind of create the flexibility without this sort of investment that you would necessarily need to make on yourself. The trade-off, of course, is you lose a degree of sovereignty, because once you have a partner, then some of the decision-making gets a little bit more complicated. But yeah, I'm not sure that there's a silver bullet to that question, but I think a combination of things.
I think in a way, the purpose of our institute, as William talked about Hong Kong can provide a platform, and that platform allows people to experiment, allows small enterprises, medium enterprises to experiment without having all your bets. Yeah, you can do small bets. You fail. If you fail fast. You fail cheap, but then you can move on. Yeah, so that's wonderful, that potential for us, Hong Kong, as a platform for doing supply chain experimentation as well. Now, the remaining time, I want to see if there are any questions from the audience who would be, maybe this is the best way. What is the best process for us to use here? Okay, good. We have hands up. Please state your name and maybe affiliation, and then if you have a particular panelist that you want to ask, or any one of them can answer, please feel free to do so.
Good morning, it's Gary from Li Fung. So the question is to all the panelists, and of course Professor Hao Li, is Chinese saying, 危机, we are dealing with risk is always opportunities, right? Just talk about the politics, right? Donald Trump probably have a chance to be re-elected as President of the United States. So he talked about 60% of duties. So that's a risk. So I just think my question is to our panelists, what's the opportunities for the companies in supply chain? Thank you.
Gary, I just answered the question last night. Anyway, in a company, I think Gary made a very important point. In every crisis, there's opportunity. And when crisis strikes, the attitude of the company of Li Fung is that it is showtime. It's a time for us to demonstrate the resilience of our supply chain. I don't know whether you're familiar with the work of Hao. 20 years ago in Harvard Business Review, Hao published an article called the AAA supply chain. It was 20 years ago. So that has been a guiding principle that we have adopted. AAA stands for agility, adaptability, and alignment. How can you be so agile to respond to changes? How can you adapt to the new realities? How do you work with your partners so that you have an aligned goals, aligned incentives? By adopting this AAA supply chain, in fact, we were able to weather the storm. During COVID and during the last few years, we've gained quite a number of market share. And it's something that I think we're not always saying, oh, let's pray for crisis. But when crisis happens, you're ready. So you've got to embed that as part of the culture of the company.
Yeah, I guess I would just add to that. I just learned from my ex-colleagues that, we suddenly have a lot of demand for shipping capacity in Mexico, where previously we didn't. There's more demand on the intra-Asia services now because of the sort of indirect trade that Dr. Fung talked about. So I think these are the types of opportunities that come up, and how quickly we can respond to that and sort of tap into that demand in an economically feasible way. That's up to us, in whatever way, shape, or form that we do it. So certainly, I think that's an example of opportunities that come up right away.
I'll add one thing. I totally agree with the other two on this. Your extreme example is the one with 100% tariffs on EVs. So even when you have a total blockage like this, basically what that creates is an opportunity to say, well, there is now a market which has very weak internal capability. It is protected from outside. If somebody can move in and you can help somebody to build a domestic local production, then right there is your opportunity. So wherever, because they are stunting their own market, if you go in with the knowledge that the EV industry in China has by now developed, I watch the cars, in Shenzhen every day. In comparison to the locally made electrical vehicles in Shenzhen, Tesla looks old. Right? I mean, you can see this in front of your eyes, as you go there every day. So, go there, use your expertise, and do something local there, and there's your opportunity.
Thanks very much. Those are great answers. Let's entertain a few more questions. Please, at the back. There are two. And then also Mr. Kwok here.
Thank you very much. This is Nadeem from Belt and Road Research Institute, Chohai College. In fact, I want to ask from Mr. Andy, because you talked about the ports and handling the cargoes. And we know that under the Belt and Road Initiative, China is investing a lot, specifically to construct the new ports. So how do you see, and because I'm from Pakistan and we know that Gwadar Port is one of the mega projects under the Belt and Road Initiative. So how do you see the impact of such kind of new ports on the global supply chain, innovation or management? And at the same time, what are the possible challenges which can create like the geostrategic, geopolitical? So I would like to ask from Mr. Andy. Thank you.
Well, I think the most direct thing I would say is, a lot of those investments that are being made through the Belt and Road programs, particularly related to ports, I just think of it as just infrastructure improvement in general. So I think in this kind of environment where the supply chains are being fractured, this infrastructure improvement comes at a very, very good time, because there's now more opportunity for different countries to now participate in this supply chain. Previously, and I think Dr. William Fung used to always ask me, what can you guys do in Bangladesh, to help us move the containers a little bit more effectively, with more certainty, and that's all infrastructure related. So I think, a lot of these investments that have gone in some ways, I think the timing is very good to help different countries take advantage of this. I guess the issues are, as a business, we will use whatever is the most efficient infrastructure and wherever the customer wants us to go. And so we certainly welcome that. So as a business, there's really no sort of downside to this, I think. Also, having more infrastructure build up, a lot of times in our industry, we run into issues of, oh, there's only one container port there, and there ends up being a bit of a monopoly, and then pricing power-wise, operating cost-wise, it impacts the supply chain. But when you have another terminal operator that comes in, then the dynamics are different, you know. So there's that kind of benefit. I guess in terms of the challenges, seemingly to me, it's a bit more geopolitical. There's a lot of talk about how I think China's trying to sort of create this network, which I'm not really able to comment. But to me, from what we see, I mean, these are container ports, so it's infrastructure, and so we welcome it.
Just a very small point there. So if you look at the Belt and Road, you've got the ports that facilitates all the shipping. You've got the roads and the rails. So it's Belt and Road, right? Itai Ilu. So the point here is that China always plays the long game. So you cannot do an ROI on Belt and Road during next 5 years, next 10 years. It's the next generation. But if you look at every time that there's a crisis, so the Red Sea crisis, when you've got to reroute through the Cape of Good Hope in Africa, the infrastructure China built in the rail area, that has paid off right away. Rail use during this period has increased by 300%. So as what Andy mentioned, it's about taking advantage of the infrastructure that China has built over the years, whatever that suits business, given all the uncertainties and crisis. So I think it's a good thing that you're in a Belt and Road initiative. I think that's a very, very important initiative, and look at it long term.
Great. I think Mr. Kwok, and then we have a question. Oh, yeah. Oh, there's one first. Yeah, sorry.
Yes, thank you. I'm Sunny Ho from the Hong Kong Shippers Councils. I have two small questions. The first one may be to Christophe. You have talked about the impact of power, and then you have mentioned that the most affected party would be the consumers. So naturally, the question that I'm going to ask would be, do consumers have a say? While our welfare, well-being have been affected, but their voices or what they want have never been mentioned, or even have they been taken into consideration in the formulation of policies and all these actions and all that? The second one is about data. Perhaps Andy and Joseph could throw us some light. We have collected a lot more data nowadays, a lot more than before. But does it contribute to wiser or better decision makings? We have continued to see investment in mega ships, in ports, and that may result in a lot of more, well, of course, without the Red Sea, then we will be facing a lot of surpluses, but we will be seeing a lot more new ships coming out. And then similarly in others, when you consider about deciding where to invest, manufacturing facilities and all that, it's all data that we have collected. Are we contributing to wiser decisions? Thank you.
Okay. So do consumers have power? Well, in the short run, if in the political decisions that we have discussed, no. Because consumers don't understand the connection. If then because of, for example, tariffs, consumer prices all of a sudden go up, then at some point there will be political pressure, and that's part of the reason why there is some hope that maybe in 10 years all of this will ease up a little bit, because it takes time in order to become apparent that efficiency is getting lost. So consumers do have power, but it takes time, and sometimes consumers get confused. So for example, in the UK, COVID came along with Brexit, and that was actively used by the Tories in the UK in order to obfuscate that Brexit had a very, very negative impact on the UK economy on multiple dimensions. So it took a while for this to sink in that there is really a negative impact. So now, a few months ago, there was a big survey in the UK, whether people in the country think Brexit was a good idea, and now everybody but in one county, now thinks that Brexit was a bad idea. So, it does sink in, but it takes time. So, it's a complicated answer to your question. Okay.
So before I talk about data, let me just, I second that opinion that consumers in the past may not have that much of a power or a voice. It's a lot of times that the brand owners, retailers, they ram things down their throat, and that's about it. Today, the voice of the consumer is getting louder. So think about earlier we talked about TikTok, and think about Shein and Temu. All this, talks about them being politically, this is a way for the Chinese government to gather data. Why has the government not yet shut down these sites? It's because of the American consumers. I dare you. You cannot do this. A lot of people are making a living out of TikTok. A lot of people are buying so much from Temu, from Shein. So now you'll see a movement by which consumers have more voice. Add to this is that we deal with so many brand owners, and a consumer will say that if this brand is not following the principles of ESG, I may not want to buy it. So if you look at so many of the top performing brands right now, they have in one way or another adopted the ESG best practices. Now let's talk about data. I feel that so if you look at supply chain management is it's the art and science of managing flows. So you've got the product flow, you've got the fund flow, and you've got the data flow. You're right. Data in itself, it doesn't mean anything. But if you convert data into intelligence, I think it means a lot. And I think there lies the power of Hong Kong. Hong Kong cannot compete with the product flow. Hong Kong will have to work with the GBA, the Greater Bay Area, in terms of production, in terms of storage and logistics. Hong Kong probably may not be cost competitive. Hong Kong has a natural advantage with the fund flow, given this is a global financial center. But I think the biggest opportunity for Hong Kong is to become the global digital superhighway, the global digital control tower. That you've got visibility across the value chain all over the world. How do you then translate that data such that that becomes an intelligence? This is how much order I place with a factory in Shenzhen, or a factory in Dhaka, or a factory in Egypt. That global control tower, if the Hong Kong government has the resolve to invest and train the resources in here to establish that, I think that's going to be the new wave of the resurgence of Hong Kong. So it's extremely important.
Well, I think we have time for one more question, so that's good.
Thank you, Hao. I'm Casey Kwok. I'm from the University of Hong Kong, a very friendly institute with Hong Kong UST. The question I have in mind is, if you look at Hong Kong's logistics, trade and the cargo numbers and so on, over the last, 10, 20 years or so, a lot more valuable cargo go by air. So if you look at Hong Kong's airport, it is now handling more than 50% of the total value of goods. But the cargo volume is not very big. They are time sensitive, they are light, they are valuable, and therefore they fly by air. And the amount of cargo handled by containers, nothing, no implications for ND, but the value of trade handled by container ships is actually has been falling and falling and falling. So when we look at supply chain management in Hong Kong, I think air cargo is something I'm not so sure whether our speakers have any insights on how we need to think about air cargo. Obviously, these are the more valuable trade, and sometimes, you know, as Joseph just mentioned now, if we want to be a digital hub, you know, handling trade, sometimes you need to think about the bigger picture and not just, you know, the cargo flows. Thank you.
Anyone want to comment on that? Air versus?
So I would just maybe make one comment on that. I think, you know, certainly the container flows that Hong Kong handles has been sort of on the decline. And of late, actually, I think for the first time, we fell outside the top 10. So, and I think a lot of that has to do with supply and demand. As the supply chain fractures, you know, there's just going to be more goods that are moving from, you know, well, on a relative basis, the mix of goods from Shenzhen, from Guangdong province, that historically really used Hong Kong quite a bit, that mix is declining because it's now being fractured. But it's also, that's on the demand side. The supply side, the reality is in the mainland, you know, there's just a huge deployment of resources into infrastructure, and there's just a huge amount of container handling capacity. And that capacity, that infrastructure is right next to where the cargo is. And so I think it's quite a natural phenomenon, quite a natural development. I think in air cargo, one of the differences is I think Shenzhen and Guangzhou Airport, and I may be very out of date on this, but I think because Hong Kong is uniquely, the air industry is unique in that every single flight is international, right? So, but if you look at Shenzhen and you look at Guangzhou, I'm pretty sure the number of international flights is relatively small compared to Hong Kong. So for example, Cathay does, at one point, did 5 flights a day to London, 4 flights a day to New York City, 777s, A350s with huge cargo handling capacity, right? And I think out of Shenzhen, you're not going to get flights to New York and London. Guangzhou, you probably do, but not as many, you know. So, and why is that the case? Part of that used to be because of traffic rights, because Hong Kong negotiates its own traffic rights, China negotiates its traffic rights, but China has to share the traffic rights between Shanghai, Beijing, Chengdu, Shenzhen, Guangzhou. So even when they get the rights, Shenzhen and Guangzhou don't necessarily get all of it, whereas, you know, Hong Kong kind of keeps its own rights. So I think Hong Kong has benefited from that, in that even though the airport infrastructure in Shenzhen and Guangzhou is built up a lot, I think if you look at the number of international destinations and flights that they have compared to Hong Kong, it's probably still very small. And that, I think, helps Hong Kong's air cargo situation. So the critical thing, I think, for Hong Kong is that third runway took way too long to come. And I think the third runway is going to go out of capacity relatively soon for something that's just coming on. So, but it is what it is. And I think we just need to kind of continuously think about how to be able to handle more flights and more cargo, have that cargo handling capacity in order not to go down the same route that container shipping did.
I'll add a slightly more general comment to this. I think air cargo isn't different from containers in the sense that because of what you just said, you can outcompete Shenzhen and Guangzhou, but you will not solve, supply chain issues to go to, to inland, to Chongqing or Shanghai or Beijing. That's just, that makes no sense at all. So the air cargo will be local, and therefore, it's not going to be the dominant mode, and in principle, it will follow the same trend as a container cargo, for specific types of goods. I think the bigger trend is the platform that we have heard mentioned several times now here, which I think I agree with, and I think that's where the potential for Hong Kong is. Hong Kong is a platform for other services to help a closed economy, a large closed economy, to deal with the outside world, and that will mean financial services, financing services, capital services, governance services, stock market services, knowledge services, that help companies, to transfer, knowledge, to have a factory in Mexico. So a platform for help, for being the motor that helps, this closed economy to be complemented to deal with the outside world. It's a huge opportunity, and that will mean that supply chains will have a bigger element of knowledge flows, information flows, rather than physical flows. That's where I think the bigger trend goes. And cargo will be, part of the, a specialized, economically slightly different element of the physical flows.
Yeah, just very quickly. I have a slightly different opinion on this. I feel that air cargo, especially Hong Kong Airport, plays a very strategic role. So if you look at the omni-channel that we're experiencing today, the marriage of the online, offline, Hong Kong Airport, it is the largest air cargo center in the world. I think 5 million tons. It will be getting bigger. And the integration of Hong Kong with the GBA plays an extremely important role. Products produced there, quick response through Hong Kong Airport. I think that's going to be I would say Hong Kong should do whatever is necessary to make sure that it continues with the leadership position. One request, in fact, for the Hong Kong government is that, well, we should not rest on our laurels. You now have a voice because you're the largest air cargo center in the world. My sense is that we should learn from what happened in West Kowloon, their high-speed rail station. You go there, it's like immigration. You just go to China and then you're there. So if Hong Kong can link with all the other airports, especially in the destination markets, so that when you ship out of Hong Kong, it's automatically cleared to the customs of the destination, that will facilitate the whole flow. And as we talk about it just now, speed is key. Quick response is key. If Hong Kong can do that, it will be a game changer.
Well, this conversation with our distinguished panelists has been very enriching. So Joseph mentioned about the paper that I wrote for the Harvard Business Review more than 20 years ago, and it's titled The AAA Supply Chain. At that time, I talked about the 3 A's, right? Agility, adaptability, and alignment. And it became a bestseller. And I talked to Victor at that time. And Victor says that how in a deck of cards, there are 4 aces. How come you have only AAA? You're short of 1A. You're missing 1A. And Victor gave me the idea. He says that, look, a supply chain can be agile, can be adaptive, can be aligned, but you still need to coordinate the 3 flows, as Joseph mentioned. You still need to design what should be the right supply chain. And so he says that you should add the 4th A, and he said it's the architect. It's the architecting the whole supply chain. I think this Hong Kong potential of serving as a platform is to allow Hong Kong to be the architect of the new global supply chain. So this conversation has reminded me of that conversation that I had with Victor a long time ago. We should be the architect. So even if the physical flow is reducing in some way and manufacturing is moving to Bangladesh, we architect that flow in financial, information, and knowledge, brain power. I think that's the wish of our institute, to help Hong Kong to become the architect. Well, once again, thank you. Thank you for all my comments.
Thank you to Professor Hao Li, our moderator, and our panelists, Mr. Andy Tong, Mr. Joseph Fee, and Professor Christoph Loh. Yes, please. Yes, we should have a group photo of our distinguished guest. Don't leave yet. Thank you again. Oh, one more. Our photographer is getting the best photo. Thank you very much. Well, what an insightful exchange of ideas and the Hong Kong's role as the architect for the supply chain management. So after gaining valuable insight from industry leaders, let's now shift our focus to research analysis provided by our academic colleagues. Up next, we have 3 professors from HKUST Business School who will be presenting on their research. To begin, I would like to invite Professor Xuan Wang, Associate Professor of Information Systems, Business Statistics, and Operations Management at HKUST Business School, to present her research on online resource allocation with limited flexibility. Professor Wang, the floor is yours.
All right, good morning, everyone. Dear distinguished guests, all the colleagues. It's really my honor to be here and share my recent research with all of you in this wonderful event. So today, I'm going to share with you some of my research. And the topic would be, I think it's very important in supply chain management, which is how we can effectively match supply with demand, especially in the world full of uncertainty and limited capacity and inventory. So when we think about resource allocations, one situation is where we have offline or static resource allocation, in the sense that you observe the demand first, and then you can decide how to allocate your limited capacity or inventory to fulfill the demand. So for instance, in the manufacturing industry, especially for instance, in the automobile industry, firms decide, okay, if I have plants available, how should I decide which plants to be used to fulfill the demand to produce different types of products, for instance, vehicles? And apparently, this is a very long-term decision, in the sense that you need to invest equipment to train your personnel and to buy resources. So in our paper, we show that, all right, instead of investing heavily such that each plant is equipped with necessary equipment to be able to serve all the products, just using a very simple training structure would have superior performance compared with a system where you have complete or full resource pooling. And I will show you in more detail later what I mean by a training structure. So in a nutshell, it means we only need to invest each plant to be able to produce 2 types of vehicles. That's enough. The performance is super good. And in another context where we have online or dynamic resource allocation, in the sense that demand will arrive one by one, and you have to decide how to fulfill the demand dynamically in real time. So for instance, in service industries, such as online retailing, right, customers' order will come in dynamically over time. And whenever you receive an order, you have to decide, okay, from which warehouse I should dispatch the available inventory to fulfill the coming demand. And if the customer cannot get fulfilled in real time, the orders will be lost. And this is the paper that I will share with you in more detail later. Okay? And in some other service contexts, where if customers arrive, they are patient enough to wait in a queue. So for instance, for Cathay Pacific, right, they operate different check-in counters at the airport. And in case there is a surge in demand, customer may have to wait. How would you decide using which servers to serve which customer, which lines? Definitely would be very important in this context. And we show that in this case, it is not necessarily optimal to have flexibility in the system, especially if your customers have different priority and waiting cost. So in certain cases, it might be optimal to strategically keep your servers idle to reserve some capacity for future customers. So now I'll come back to the main paper I would like to share. So if you think about this online retailing setting, right? So a retailer, online retailer has several warehouses, and a customer order arrives. And apparently, when an order comes in, you have to decide if I have more than one warehouse with the available inventory, from which warehouse I should dispatch the order. So this is a screenshot I took a few days ago from Jingdong app. So for instance, if I want to buy this storage box, and if the shipping address is Xi'an, which is my hometown, you will see it is out of stock. And if customers, because of the competition, will have lots of alternatives, these customers will most likely to be lost. Okay? But if your shipping address is in Shenzhen, then you will see it is guaranteed to be delivered next day if you place your order by 10 p.m. Same product, same time, when I look at the platform, they will have different in-stock versus out-of-stock availability. So apparently, Jingdong does not use every warehouse to potentially serve every customer, right? Then the question is, okay, how should I decide from which warehouse I should serve? A very natural approach would be, okay, I will just divide the entire country into several regions and use one DC or warehouse to serve each region separately. So that's what we call a dedicated system, so no flexibility at all. Apparently, the shipping distance will be very close. Because of the shipping proximity, shipping time will be guaranteed, and also the shipping cost will be minimal. But apparently, now we will have the issue of, at the same time, lot sales for some region, and at the same time, some excess inventory from another region. Alternatively, we can decide, okay, I'm going to use a fully flexible distribution center system, in the sense that as long as I have inventory in any one of the warehouse, I will ensure the customer will not be lost. And this will achieve the maximum sales in units, but we might need to incur very long routing time and high shipping cost. Then the question is how we can balance the trade-off. Okay? So apparently, Jingdong does not use a fully flexible system. And our proposal is as follows. Right? So we will just use some local warehouses, so just have a very limited degree of flexibility. And we want to see what is the performance of this partial flexible distribution system compared with the fully flexible one. Okay. All right, so this is the system I'm talking about, so which is a system where I only use the two nearest locations. So for instance, if I'm in Shenzhen, a customer, I will only look at warehouses in Shenzhen and Guangzhou, for instance, right? And if I don't have available stock in either Shenzhen or Guangzhou, I will simply let this customer to be lost. And equivalently, this can be pictured as this so-called long chain structure, which is a very well-known concept in supply chain. And this locality in the choice of warehouses will ensure low shipping cost and prompt delivery. Then the question is, how does it perform in terms of lost sales performance compared with the complete resource pooling? So in the interest of time, I'll just very briefly go through the setup, and then I'll show you the main result. So suppose we have n different regions, and we have n different warehouses. And each customer, right, so we'll have a probability distribution regarding what is the chance that the next request or next order will come from region J. And then we'll only consider warehouses J and J plus 1. Okay? All right, so we will assume a very simple setting where the total inventory K is equal to the total market size K. So we don't have any safety stock in the system. And our benchmark would be if we allow every warehouse to serve all the regions, so that's the best possible in terms of achieving a minimum lot sales, versus what if we only consider this long chain design, okay? All right, so this is the basic setup. And apparently, once we have two warehouses available, right, both with available inventory, then which one we should use? So the allocation policy matters. A very straightforward and commonly used policy in practice is what we call the primary resource first policy. So for instance, if J primarily serves region J, I will first look at if I have available stock or not in warehouse J? If yes, I'm going to utilize warehouse J. If not, then I will look at warehouse J plus 1. Okay. Our policy, which we call modified greedy policy, as an additional layer into the allocation process, which is we consider an inventory balancing regime in the sense that I will compare, right, these two warehouses and compare, okay, to look at what is my available, current inventory available divided by my initial inventory. So what is fraction of inventory that has not been utilized in one of these two warehouses? And whichever has a higher ratio, I'm going to utilize that warehouse, right? And this is the last slide, right? So I'll show you the main result. So our takeaway here is that if I utilize the long-term design, right, look at the two nearest locations, the allocation policy matters. So for the primary resource first policy, we will see as you increase your market size, right, as you have more and more customers orders coming in, your lot sale will diverge over time. So you have more and more lot sales. However, if you do this inventory balancing idea, regardless how large your market size is, we observe that the lot sale is much smaller, and more importantly, it does not grow with your market size. And our main result is as follows. So if you use the training structure and using the inventory balancing idea in resource allocation, no matter you have 1,000, 10,000, or 1 million orders coming in, your lot sales will be bounded from above by a constant that is independent of your market size, right? So in very small scale. And this is essentially a constant order performance bound compared to the full flexibility benchmark. All right, so I think that's the end of my research sharing. Thanks for your attention.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Professor Wang. So may I now invite Professor Guo Dongyu, Assistant Professor of Information Systems, Business Statistics, and Operations Management of HKUST Business School, to share his research. The topic is Last Mile Innovation, the case of the Locker Alliance Network. Professor Liu, please.
Thanks for the introduction. So thanks, Jen, for the next sharing about how to improve the order fulfillment by using a little flexibility. So next, I'll move to the last mile segment, see how to improve the order delivery in the last mile. So it's the final leg of the supply chain management. So first of all, I would like to acknowledge my collaborators who made this project happen. Okay, let's start. So in the last decades, we have seen a dramatic growth in the sales of e-commerce retailing. So this intensive transactions drive many parcel deliveries and also greatly promotes the development of the urban logistics. For example, in the year 2021, the total number of parcels worldwide reached 159 billion. That means, on average, 5,000 parcels were shipped per second, more than 400 million parcels per day, and 41 parcels for each member of the population. While this also increased the workload to deliver these parcels and brings compounded challenge to the last mile delivery. So here, last mile delivery means the final leg of the parcel delivery to the end customers. It's also the most expensive and most time-consuming parts of the entire logistics. According to the findings by the Singapore government, so in Singapore, the biggest challenge faced by the local logistic company is that when the carrier delivers a parcel to their home, to the consumer home, they find no one at home. In this case, the carriers have to reschedule another delivery. So this second attempt delivery made cost to the companies, also inconvenience for the consumers. So to enable a more sustainable last mile ecosystem, innovation is the key. So as part of the Singapore Smart Nation initiatives to shape the future of the urban logistics, the Singapore government launched this pilot program for the Locker Alliance network in 2 towns at the end of year 2018. And we were part of these projects, and we helped the government to build up the parcel locker network in these 2 selected towns, we also did a survey to help them to understand consumer behavior towards the parcel pickup between home or locker. So due to the success of the pilot program, in the year of 2021, the Singapore government launched this nationwide parcel locker with 1,000 lockers among the island. So in the traditional mode without lockers, the carriers visit the consumers one by one, and consumers usually wait at home for their parcel delivery. Here, parcel locker refers to a collection of drop box with the electronic verification function. So through the channel of the parcel locker, the carrier can first drop a parcel to the locker, then get a unique access code. The consumer then receives code and pick up their parcel from locker at their own convenience. So we can see that through the locker channel, we can decouple the processes of parcel delivery and parcel pickup. So we can reduce the coordination cost within the last mile. The parcel locker can also consolidate the scattered door-to-door delivery into a few common locations, allowing the carriers, say the delivery man, to deliver multiple parcels to one common location, thereby reducing the carbon emissions generated from the last mile activities. So in the projects, we aim to help the government to unlock the values of the parcel locker for all the stakeholders involved in the e-commerce delivery chain, including the society, the consumer, and the service provider. So aim to use our efforts to build up the optimal network to enhance the delivery sustainability, to increase the delivery efficiency, and to provide greater convenience for the consumers. But here, when we build the parcel locker network, the key challenge is we don't have the complete information of the demands for the locker usage. Then how can we do? For example, the consumers who used to pick up their parcel from their office may choose to deliver their parcels to the lockers near their home, if there are some lockers near the home. So without using this information, we cannot build up the optimal locker network. In other words, we don't have the home office transit patterns, except for our Hong Kong UST faculties. So why? Because we all live on campus, we know the information. But if we don't know, how can we do? So in other words, we have to predict the demand pattern in the future, but we don't have network right now. So in our research, we collect the delivery records in the past, also the consumer choice between home and locker delivery, and the public transit pattern for the demand prediction. Then we leverage the AI and optimization techniques to integrate the demand prediction into the locker network design model. So we built this data-driven locker network design framework. This allows us to develop the network to address the demand endogeneity issues. We can also incorporate the consumer choice and fleet travel distance into the network design. So surprisingly, contrary to the conventional wisdom, our network model doesn't always place locker near the areas with the highest demands. Instead, we can place locker near the areas to attract more demands in the future. So that's a key contribution of this framework. So leverage the model, we can unlock the value of the parcel locker network. So for example, we can show that our locker network can divert the parcels that are originally delivered to the CBD area here, to the residential area when we have locker. So in this way, we can reduce the traffic to the CBD region, thereby reducing the carbon emissions. We can show that with a well-designed locker network, we can reduce the volume parcel delivery to the CBD area by 7.5%. On the other hand, recall that the parcel locker network can help the driver to deliver multiple parcels to one single location, so thereby increasing their productivity by 4 times. This means that the driver can deliver 4 times more parcel in a single day. So here in our counterfactual analysis, we show that if there are more than 50% of consumers using locker, we can increase their efficiency by 10%. But if the number of locker usage is very small, using a locker can reduce the efficiency. So this gives rise to our final question. How can we enhance the consumer engagement? So again, we use data to validate a common industry planning norm. Say the locker should be placed within a 5-minute walk, say 250 meters between the consumer location and the locker station. While beyond this range, the utility of using locker will drop significantly. On the other hand, we also used a field experiment to show that the exposure effect, which is defined as the change in the locker usage after an initial trial, can enhance the locker adoption rates. This means that we give the consumer a try, then the consumer are more likely to use the locker by themselves in the future. So that's our key findings. This also validates the ongoing efforts of the coupon treatment by the government to encourage the locker usage in the future. So to summarize, here we use the Singapore Locker Alliance Network to show our efforts and the research on the last mile innovation. And we believe that the locker network can contribute to the sustainability in the last mile delivery. And these results and findings can also be adapted to other regions like Hong Kong. So that concludes my sharing. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor Liu. Please be seated. Next, may I invite Professor Dong Wook Shin, Assistant Professor of Information Systems, Business Statistics, and Operations Management at HKUST Business School, to share his research. The topic is Last Mile Innovation, the case of the Locker Alliance Network. Professor Shin, please.
By the way, my talk is
Oh,
about
sorry.
supply chain coordination in the presence
Supply
of
chain coordination in the presence of social learning.
Yeah.
Typo. Apologies.
No worries. Thanks for the introduction. I'm very excited and honored to present at this prestigious event. Obviously, we are running out of time, so let me directly jump into my presentation. So with the growing popularity of e-commerce, many manufacturers are expanding their market through online platforms such as Taobao and Amazon. And my research is focused on this platform-based supply chain. And these platforms work very differently from traditional brick-and-mortar retailers. One of the main differences is that they have a vast amount of information about customers. And this information can then shared with manufacturers that work on the platforms. During my research, I was able to work with some of the manufacturers that sell their product at Taobao. And I found that the platform, Taobao, actually shares a lot of information. They're very comprehensive, very detailed information with manufacturers, which I believe helps a lot of manufacturers when making their important decisions about their products. So I have some screenshots of the data that Taobao shares with manufacturers. This is not public information, but I got permission from the manufacturers. Okay? So for example, they shared information about geographical distribution of customers. They share other consumer demographics, such as Taobao score, which represents consumers' spending power. They also show gender distribution, spending amount distribution, and also the proportions of new and old customers. They also share some traffic diagnostics, which shows how consumers behave in multiple steps until purchase. And what's more interesting is that with the help of AI, this data is analyzed and translated into actionable insights. So I think you cannot see the text here, but this information is extremely useful for manufacturers in making their business decisions. Okay? So that's one major feature of this platform-based supply chain, the information. Another difference from the traditional market is that there is a vast number of customers, and these customers are not independent of each other. Okay? These customers interact, they share their opinions, they share their thoughts, experiences with other customers on the platform. Excuse me. And these interactions are actually very important for the platform. Okay? And in our research, we focus on these kind of interaction through online reviews. On most of these platforms, if you're a customer, you can share your experience in the form of 5-star rating, as you can see right here. And your rating can affect the purchase behavior of all the subsequent customers. Okay? And this is a drastic difference from traditional market. In the traditional market, if you're happy with the product, then you may share your experience with maybe 5 of your friends. But in this e-commerce market, you can share your experience with over 5,000 people from the global community. Okay? So this is the interaction in much bigger scale. Okay? And of course, this online review, the impact of these online reviews on consumer behavior is extensively studied in the literature. But its impact on supply chain is not well explored. And we found that this impact actually propagates up in the supply chain. So what we found in my research is that, well, online reviews facilitate social interactions, and these interactions in turn affect demand. It shifts demand over time, and therefore firms adjust their retail prices accordingly. This in turn affects the manufacturer's decisions, such as quality and pricing. And this, again, in turn affects how platforms share their information with the manufacturers on their platform. Okay? So when I started this research, I was faced with some conventional knowledge in supply chain. One of these conventions is that information sharing is not always good for the supply chain. It tends to benefit the manufacturer, but it harms the platform and eventually harms the entire supply chain. Another conventional belief that I faced with is that the inferior product cannot prevail in the presence of good review system because the product quality becomes more transparent, right? And Jeff Bezos, the CEO of Amazon, called this phenomenon product meritocracy because it means that only good product can survive in this environment. In my research, I try to challenge these conventional beliefs, and we actually found that, well, these are not always true, especially when the supply chain is operating with online reviews. Okay? Specifically, well, these online reviews seem to be the best friend of customers because they're very useful. But turns out that this can actually be enemies of the supply chain. So to illustrate our results, let me first explain the well-known concept of double marginalization. So this refers to a situation where each firm applies a markup to its own price. And we know that because firms have misaligned interests, their markups eventually lead to a decrease in the supply chain performance. And what we find in our research is that online reviews tend to aggravate this negative impact of double marginalization, which means that firms become much more aggressive in terms of applying the margin, and therefore it hurts even more the total supply chain profits. And it's not just that. This effect propagates up in the supply chain, and we found that online reviews sort of discourages platforms to share their information with manufacturers. And this in turn induced the manufacturers to decrease the product quality in the market. Okay? And these negative effects is somewhat contradict to our conventional beliefs. So how can we overcome this? In our research, we have come up with some couple of strategies to tackle this problem. Okay, but I think I'm not going to jump into detail because I'm obviously out of time. We have two strategies. One strategy we found is that the wholesale price is not good because it aggravates the situation. But surprisingly, commission contract can completely eliminate the situation if you choose the right commission contract. Okay? So between wholesale and commission contract is the way to go when you are working with online reviews. Another insight that we found is that the companies can be better off by shading information. Here, shading means sharing a less accurate information, which can be done in multiple ways in the market. For example, instead of sharing weekly data, instead of sharing daily data, they can share only weekly or even monthly data, much less accurate data. Okay? And interestingly, what we found is that the shading information can actually benefit the whole supply chain, which is interesting because by sharing less accurate information, okay, the firms in the supply chain can actually be better off. Okay? So overall, well, we studied this problem in terms of online reviews, but what I wanted to highlight in this research is that when we introduce some new technologies, such as online reviews in the digitalized supply chain, we have to be cautious, because even if it looks fancy and good for customers, it may hurt the supply chain as a whole. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Professor Shin. Apology of misreading your title. It's very exciting. Thank you. So last but not the least, it's my great pleasure to invite Professor Ching Li on stage to talk about the Institute, HKUST Li Fung Supply Chain Institute, the strategy and all the good things. Thank you.
All right, so Carlo just told me I have only 3 to 4 minutes, so let me see how can that be done. So I'm going to start with a little bit of background. Right? So when the Hong Kong budget adjust first came out, I read it as a research paper. I read it multiple times. I highlighted it again. And I found that there are 4 places I found it very interesting and very relevant to what we do, and I'd like to share with you here. So the first one is the mention of multinational supply chain management center. Right? The second place I found interesting is the mention of providing consulting services, including business operation, production and supply chain solution, and market information, and so on. And the third place is the mention of trade financing. So we heard quite a bit early on. And the last place is about corporate training. So Hong Kong has a long history of managing global supply chains. So we obviously have a lot of experience to share with the company coming from mainland China, especially the medium-sized company. So what is the key point? What is the key message? The key message is that mainland enterprises, especially medium-sized ones, are extending the supply chain abroad. And Hong Kong can play an important role in this process, including providing consulting services, including providing trade financing, and including providing corporate training. Right? So that's the key message. Right? So with that as a little bit of background and also a little bit of motivation, so we established the Supply Chain Institute to achieve 3 important missions. So the first one is to advance the knowledge of supply chain management. And the second is to develop talent on supply chain management through teaching and conferences. And the third one is to serve the community. So these 3 missions are very much consistent with our missions at HKUST as a research and education institution. So how do we do that? So supply chain management is very complex, so that requires collaboration. So we're hoping that we can use the Institute as a platform and to bring people together to deal with challenging problems. Right? So we want to involve HKUST Business School. We also want to involve other schools at HKUST. We want to also involve other universities, including local and non-local. And we also want to work with local industry and governments and also NGO. Right? So this is the platform we want to set up. All right, so let's talk about the organization. So the Institute will be managed by the Institute Management Office, and supported by 1 board and 2 committees. So the advisory board is chaired by Dr. William Fung. So the advisory board will provide advice and oversight and participate in strategic decision making. And the academic committee will manage the academic affair, right? So the academic committee is chaired by Professor Hao Li. And then the executive committee will assist the management office to manage the institute and also liaise with different partners outside and inside HKUST, right? So the executive committee is chaired by myself and also Kaman. So where's Kaman? Kaman, can you sit up? Yeah, okay. All right, so what do we do? So I like to use a 4x4 matrix to describe what we do. So we're going to focus on 4 important areas in supply chain management. So that include global supply network, technology and supply chain finance, and also sustainability. So we're going to conduct 4 types of activity to advance the 4 areas in supply chain management. So that include collaborative research and thought leadership and business intelligence and talent development. So I'm going to talk a little bit about 2 areas and skip the other 2, so to save some time. Right? So the first focus area is on a global supply network. Right? So the central question is it's an old one. So how can we design supply network to optimize efficiency and responsiveness? Right? So, but then in order to answer that question, we need to consider 2 important factors. So the first one is the new business model. So new business model require a redesign our global supply network, right? So for example, if you sell through platform, if you sell through social media, and your supply network have to be more agile, more responsive, and have the capability of fast delivery and also handle small orders, right? So the second factor is geopolitics. Earlier we heard quite a bit about it. So geopolitical factor can have profound impact on the design of global supply network, right? So because of geopolitical factor, so you have to find new trading rules. So for example, and you have to be diversify your supply, and you have to ensure compliance, and so on and so forth. So the third factor is the need for resiliency, right? So, so in the past, we focused a lot on efficiency, right? So right now, especially after the pandemic, so the pandemic has exposed vulnerability in supply chain leading to delay and shortages. So right now, when we think about the question of designing the global supply network, we have to have a new balance. We think about the new balance between efficiency and resiliency. So the last factor is about the emerging markets, right? So the rise of emerging markets represent opportunities and also challenges. So when you design the global supply network, you need to take into local factors such as cultural nuance and infrastructure constraint and also logistic challenges and so on and so forth, right? So in the end, at the bottom here, I also list all the levers that we have in designing the global supply network. So this is the first focus area. So the second focus area is about the impact of technology. So this is the area where our university, HKUST, is very good at. So our supply chain is very rich in data. So there's so much data we can use. So we can use the data, to analyze the data to get insights. We can do simulation, we can do optimization. So in order to improve efficiency and reduce cost, improve customer service, and also reduce mismatch between supply and demand, right? So Internet of Things allow us to get real-time data, which support decision making. And blockchain will allow us to increase the traceability and also reduce fraud, right? So finally, AI and machine learning will enable intelligent decision making and automation. So this is the second focus area. So I'm going to jump to, because of time constraint, I'm going to jump to the 4 sets of activities. So the 4 sets of activities align very nicely with the priorities outlined in the government budget address. So for example, So in order for you to provide consultant services, so we have to have a deep understanding of the field supply chain management. So that can be achieved through collaborative research, right? So, and then we're going to translate the finding in research into actionable insights through conferences, publication, and forums. So that's what we call thought leadership. And then market information. So in order for you to provide market information, you have to have market information. So that can be done through our work in related to business intelligence. And finally, as I mentioned earlier, so Hong Kong, the business sector is very rich in experience in managing global supply chain. So we are committed to working with local industry in providing training, providing talent developments, especially to the company coming from mainland China, the medium-sized company. Right. So in closing, I'd like to add a personal note. So in 1998, so I was a graduate student and looking for topics for my dissertation. So I was struggling. So my advisor told me, so Ching, there's a really interesting article just came out in Harvard Business Review. So you should have a look. And so the title of the article is Fast, Global, and Entrepreneurial Supply Chain Management Hong Kong Style. So this is how I get my career as a scholar started. So what an honor, what a privilege today is to serve at a supply chain management institute that is named after Li and Fung. So I look forward to working with you to make a meaningful impact. Thank you.
Wow. Thank you, Professor Ching Li. That's a really nice note to finish our conference and summit today. Thank you again, for attending the HKUST Li and Fung Supply Chain Institute inaugural summit. We appreciate your participation and, attention. So, although the summit has ended, the conversation on supply chain challenges and opportunities should continue. Please join us for lunch and to continue these wonderful discussions with fellow industry professionals. Thank you. It has been my honor to serve as your MC today, and please enjoy your conversation. Have a great day.